Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Taking the Lead, where I have the opportunity and the joy of interviewing some of our most respected leaders from the PR and communications worlds. We don't really talk much about PR and communications because we really want their insights on inspiring leadership, how to be more inspired and inspiring leaders. So, for today, we're very excited to introduce an icon in our industry, truly. It's Bob Pearson. Before we turn it to him, let me tell you a bit about him. He's the founder and chair of the Next Practices Group. He's the CEO of the Bliss Group, and he is the chair of the Next Solutions Group. He is also currently a lecturer for the U.S. government on combating disinformation and extremism, and boy, do we need that today. And he's an advisor for various media software companies and the author of 4 books. In his spare time, he's a member of the board of directors of the Association for the Multiple Impaired and Blind. Previously, he was vice chair and chief innovation officer of W2O, now known as Real Chemistry, and he's an adjunct professor at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. We're going to do a shout out to my niece, Samara Speiler, who recently graduated from their honors program. So I'm a very proud uncle. Anyway, that much said, let's welcome to Taking the Lead, Bob Pearson.
And great to be here, and thanks for having me on.
We're happy to have you. So we're going to dig right in as we always do. What are your, 3 or so most important tenets for effective, inspiring leadership?
Well, I'd say it's a great question. And the first one, which is the most important by far, is I always ask myself, am I unlocking a leader, and am I unlocking the team that follows that leader? So if I stay focused on that, I'm not just thinking about, am I inspiring, but I'm thinking of, does this leader have the tools they need to succeed? Do they have a clear vision themselves of where they can go? Do they have the right team that's with them? So that is something that I think is very important. And, I was reflecting on this, Ken, before this, of where did I first learn that? And it was going back to Rome-Blanc-Roure, which is now Sanofi. And at the age of 29, 30 years old, here I am managing a global team. And you start to realize, like, how do I know that the people in France will actually do something when I leave? How do I know the people in Japan who are saying yes to me will do something? And you realize that it's about unlocking that team. And if you do that, they're going to go in the right direction on their own. And then it becomes really servant leadership. How do I help them be more and more successful over time?
I've heard the concept of giving your people the freedom to lead, but this is the first time I've heard the concept of unlocking, and it's very powerful. And I think when you do that and you think that way, now you're creating a leadership legacy, because I think it's not only whom you lead, but helping them become better leaders. And that does something to the next generation and the one after that.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I think, Ken, we know this think of the consulting business. Can you get high performance out of people by telling them what to do? You can. But is that fun for any of us? No. So what I always think of is, like, we need to be following our passion. And a passion is not always just building a practice. It could be the type of people you bring in. It could be the way you approach client service. It's all these things that we need to help our people become great at. And I think that the interesting thing for me is I learn faster by doing that than if I read 25 books, because you're really seeing what really truly matters to leaders to unlock themselves. And then I say, okay, got it. I need to get better at this. I need to actually do more homework here to help them. And it's a perpetual cycle.
Now, I agree with most of that. The one thing I'd propose is the notion of telling people is, beside not being fun for either side, it's not nearly as effective, because when we ask an empowering question, we light up the part of their brains where creativity and action and commitment and collaboration and even memory and all those important points reside. So I encourage everyone in training and in coaching, not from your brain, your mouth, figure out a way to make it come from their brain and their mouth.
Yeah,
And that's
agree,
always through an empowering question.
agree.
So,
I
so
totally agree.
yeah, my mantra for leaders and for myself as a coach is don't tell, ask. Don't tell,
Yes.
ask. Anyway, but no one wants to hear about me. We want to hear about you. When did you have that aha moment when you realized I'm not just a communications practitioner, I'm not even a manager. I'm a leader. I'm an inspirer of people. When did that moment perhaps happen for
Yeah.
you?
I think there's a bunch of moments like that, but some real tangible ones were when I was at Dell.
Hmm.
And so when I was at Dell, here's a great example of this. When I was talking to Michael, we were talking about how to get ideas from customers. And so he said, look at what Mark Benioff's doing and let's see what we can do. And out of that, we built something called Idea Storm, where we could actually have customers come in, bring ideas into us, vote on them, comment on them, and then we would bring them to engineers and designers to actually improve the products and services we were providing. Well, that's when you realize, like, the team that's working with me, what we're really doing is we're unlocking our customers.
Mm.
We're helping the rest of the company succeed. And yet what it is a communications exercise, right? So that's, I think, when you realize that if you're really doing this well, the impact you make goes way beyond the team that you're working with. And that's one of those really interesting times where you go, okay, now how many more times can I do that? Right? It's addictive in a way because you realize how powerful it is.
We talk a lot about leading our teams, leading our peers, leading up to our bosses, leading our clients. I never thought about leading our customers,
Right.
And that's what you're doing. And what a concept! Asking people what they think they need and want, and then seeing if you can give that to them.
Well,
And yeah, they're going to see things I suppose you're not going to see.
and Ken, that led us to, like, in analytics. I think our team is known for being pioneers in how to create the next algorithms, the next data science models. But it's all around understanding the audience so we can align with the audience. So we think about it's the same concept to say we're only so smart. The audience is sitting here with the answers. If we can only build the algorithms that will actually find those answers, then we're at our best, right? And so really, any leader is only as good as their ability to impact someone else. And it sometimes is a team and sometimes an audience.
Yeah. So you said there were a few times. Is there another time you'd want to share where you had that earlier in your career, you had that moment of, I'm
Yeah.
leading?
Yeah. I mean, and I'll use another Dell example since we're on that vein is, one of the things Michael taught myself and many other people was how to not put barriers in front of yourself when you're making decisions. So I had gone to him and said, hey, we don't have a customer response policy. If someone's complaining about us somewhere in the world, we don't make a commitment of when we'll get to them. He said, well, that doesn't make sense. Go fix that. So I came back to him and I got a whole team together, all these people. And I was really proud that we had come up with a 24-hour response policy. And so I then submitted that to him and he called me up and he said, this is a great piece of work. Thank you for you and the team doing it, but you made a typo. And I said, well, where's the typo, Michael? And he goes, well, there's a period missing between the 2 and the 4. And I said, come on, dude, you're cutting 22 hours off and we haven't even launched this. He said, yeah, but you're not thinking of it the right way. You should have thought of 0 hours and said, how quickly can you respond versus how can you corral people together and convince them to agree on something. And so he said, well, I said, well, I didn't think of that because I'm not Michael Dell, right? So, but it made me realize that our brains put blocks in front of us all the time. And so as a leader, what you're doing is you're trying to say, what blocks are my team putting in front of themselves? How do I clear that brush out? Like taking a machete in a jungle, clear all that junk out so people can just move, And so that was another epiphany.
That's a great visual of a leader. Really.
Yeah, with the machete going through a jungle,
Yeah,
clearing stuff out. Right.
Love
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
So, related to what we just talked about, what is your best counsel? I know we have viewers who really want to make the jump, I believe, from maybe less practitioner to manager, but more manager to leader, manager to true leader, manager to consistent leader. What's
Yeah.
some of your best counsel for them?
So this is where I go back to being, I grew up as an athlete. And so, so if I had sat around and said, hey, I want to be good at baseball, I'm not going to become good at baseball. As you know, you have to go out and practice, right? So if you want to be a great leader, you have to do things like blog, like whether you do it publicly or privately, write down your thoughts, let other people see them. You should be speaking in front of groups and articulate your thoughts and see how they react. You look for all the different opportunities to present your ideas and take that feedback in. Because what leaders are really good at doing is they're ultimately good at judging when they can say something and why, so they can impact and shape the behavior of others. And you can't do that unless you practiced it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So I think too many folks will sit around and they'll say, Ken, I really want to be a leader. The real question is, well, what are you doing about it like every day? And the answer is, well, I'm gonna.
Mhm.
That doesn't work.
No.
It's like I'm going to practice baseball someday. You're never going to play. So that's how I look at it.
Excellent. So, although I mentioned three corporate names up front, you're actually leading directly and indirectly a dozen companies
Yeah.
now. So how do you divide your time? And maybe more important, how do you divide your bandwidth, your mental bandwidth, your energy across so many organizations and sub leaders? And how do you do that effectively?
Yeah. And this is, again, I feel like such a great benefit that in my client career, I got to see some really great CEOs up close, not just Michael, but also Dan Vasella at Novartis and others. And what you realize is, gosh, what I run is nothing compared to what they were running. So what you realize is you can't run everything. You can't control everything. And if you try to do that, you're absolutely going the wrong direction.
Mhm.
So what you do is you say every day, where can I make the biggest impact on the performance, not only for the current day, but for the future? And I live by what we call 3x3, which is 3-year vision. And then you think in 3-month increments.
Hmm.
So if you said, what am I going to do the next 3 months? It's related to the 3-year vision. So if something is interesting, but not going that direction, I don't prioritize it. So, but building a certain practice or, figuring out our pricing analysis or something like that, those are all things I'm like, yeah, those are important. So that's really the 3x3 is such a great model because I did this inside companies at first, because if you were trying to implement something with a team, you had to have your 3-year vision to say, I think this is where we're going to end up. So you make those right calls in January, February, March, and then April, May, June. If you don't do that, you end up doing a lot of work, and then people get frustrated and they say, how come we're not going the right direction? It's like, well, because you're not making a lot of the right calls, they're going to get you there. So that's what I've learned from doing it.
I think especially that quarterly view is so important for anyone in business, anyone leading a group, even if you're an entrepreneur, looking at what you did in the last quarter and saying, what worked? What am I going to do more of next quarter? What didn't work, but maybe if we tweak it, I can make it work. So what learnings did
Mm-hmm.
I get? And what am I putting on the watch out list? This doesn't seem to be working. I'm not going to tweak it, but it might work in the next quarter. But then after that, we may need to jettison it. So I think that quarterly check-in, absolutely
And
critical.
you hit on a key thing in there, Ken, is like, there's things that don't work. And I think, leaders who are strong leaders are honest enough to go, that just didn't work. So I always say, like, having a great batting average is what you want. But to think that everything I do is going to work, like that's a pipe dream. So you just have to be honest with yourself.
So that's a good segue to our last question for Bob Pearson. I mean, I've endorsed leaders need to get feedback on their
Yeah.
effectiveness, their performance as a leader. And it takes a lot of courage. And you're going to hear some things you don't want to hear, but you need to hear if you are, as you said, a servant leader and you want to do better.
Yeah.
So, how do you get feedback on Bob Pearson's leadership effectiveness performance?
So the feedback I get is every day in it. If you're giving a presentation to a client, we dissect afterwards, how did we do and why? Which means we're being critical of ourselves. If we're actually running a meeting, we'd say, okay, what did we do well? What did we not do well? And what I've found is same thing that we know. Like if someone said, hey, let's interview Michael Jordan, and you said, how do you do in whatever he's doing? he'd tell you all the things he did wrong. He would say, I need to improve here. I need to do that differently. And so what I find is that strong leaders are always wondering what I can do to improve. And the leaders who are not as strong are always telling you how amazing and awesome they are. Right. So it's, so that's, but I think it's right in front of us. So it's not like you have to make it up. It's like, okay, we just had a meeting, it's like this. We're doing this podcast. What could I have done differently next time? That's how my mind works. I will come 15 minutes later, I'm going to be thinking, oh, I probably should have said this. Next time I can do this,
But I do think it's key for leaders to ask for the feedback. They may not get it if they don't ask.
Right.
And I think they have to ask in a way that makes clear they want honest feedback, because at the end of the day, if your name's on the check, their first instinct may not be to give you the feedback you need. But if you make clear you want to hear it, that
I think Jack Welch, what did he say years ago? He said you have to say something so often that you get tired saying it. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those areas where you have to say, I want your feedback. I want you to be honest, not just with me, but with anyone else. And you have to never stop saying that. Yeah. So people know that it's really real. And then there has to be no penalty for being honest. Exactly. So if you don't like what someone's saying, that's okay. It's cool. It's cool to have an argument now and then.
Yeah. Or just say, that's not what I expected to hear. I'm really going to have to think about that,
Exactly.
You don't have to agree, but it's probably worth thinking about, because that's their perception of you as a leader, right? They may be wrong, quote unquote, but if that's their current perception, then that gives you some insight to something you might want to do differently, whether it's in the next presentation or how you're communicating to people.
So Ken, I would add to that.
Yeah,
what I always say to ourselves and to clients is that in science and technology, if you think about any innovation, it's a series of failures that we learn from that lead to a breakthrough, right? It's never that you just decide to do something and it's amazing and it works. So business is the same way. We have to be learning from our failures, even if they're small ones, and then we'll get to a great place. But if we never do that, we're not going to be as innovative as we think we're going to be.
Exactly. And for those of you, if it's not enough to believe Bob Pearson on this, and I think it should be enough, know that Edison agrees with him, Einstein agrees with him, Ella Fitzgerald, Oprah, so many amazing leaders in all walks of life truly celebrate their failures as steps on the road to success. So we should be, and Dolly Parton, another example. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for we mere mortals, right? Anyway, Bob, this has been a great couple of minutes. Learned a lot, got some inspiration. I so appreciate your taking time out of your day to share your thoughts about leaders. And folks, please come back, keep coming back. And until then, keep taking the lead. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ken.